I'd like to introduce Jack Park, a longtime colleague. We were part of Doug Engelbart's core planning committee. We met from 2001 to 2004. So, Jack.
Thank you, Mei-Lin. I could probably talk for an hour, but I want to condense it down to just a couple of points that are of interest to me. The first one was the way I met Doug, and that was through Adam Chire. Adam Chire became the leader of a group that I worked for at VerticalNet, and he said that I should meet Doug, so he took me over, and Doug was planning the Unfinished Revolution 2 lecture series, and I explained to Doug what I did, and he asked if I would give a lecture in the series, which I did. And that led to Doug and I and Mei-Lin and several others beginning to talk in depth about what this thing called a dynamic knowledge repository and coevolution of human and computer systems, or human and tool systems. So I'm going to use that as a segue to bring in the second point I wanted to make, and that is that I'd like to suggest that with the passing of Dr. Engelbart is not the passing of his vision. There are lots and lots of people working with interpretations of what he had in mind, and I say that very carefully, interpretations. I don't think it's possible to actually implement precisely what Doug had in mind, because it's so difficult to get it out of him exactly what he was thinking. So we do interpretations. The interpretation that I am carrying forward of the dynamic knowledge repository is called a knowledge garden, and I want to tell you just a little bit about the story of that naming convention. There's some really brilliant people in a group called the Millennium Project. For example, Jerry Glynn and Young-Suk Park in Korea, who arranged for me to give a talk in Seoul in 2007 about the title of the talk was Just-in-Time Learning. And fundamentally, it was about the issues of global HR, human resources, given that the United States, Korea, and many of the developed countries in the world have aging populations, and the difficulty of getting workers trained to do these jobs. So they asked me to talk about just-in-time learning, but they said, that's the title of your talk, the podium is yours. So I chose to write a paper that combined the concepts of the dynamic knowledge repository with the explanation of how innovation works in Kurt Carlson's book on innovation. I wrote the paper, and I talked about dynamic knowledge repositories and 3x5 cards and card indexes in the indexes in the library, and so on and so forth. And a fellow here in the Silicon Valley named Ted Kahn read my paper, and he said, don't you think it would be better if you called it a dynamic knowledge garden instead of dynamic knowledge repository? Because a repository sounds like a bank. It sounds like a place you put stuff in and maybe it accrues some interest and so forth. But he thought that a garden was a better metaphor, so that's what I took to Korea. And when I gave the talk in Korea, Young-Suk Park came up to me afterwards and she said, we like this. We like this a lot. These are people, by the way, who know Doug, who follow Doug, and they know what a dynamic knowledge repository is, but they like dynamic knowledge garden better, except Young-Suk asked me, would you drop dynamic? They like 2 words, not 3. So what I'm trying to tell you is the story of how the dynamic knowledge repository, the DKR, is now a knowledge garden. Now, that's just my interpretation, but I want you to understand many other people are building various interpretations of the same concept. It's all about collective intelligence. I think Mei-Lin is off finding John. How about you? Please.